And hello everyone, welcome to Suprema Connect on BioStar2, a new local API introduction. My name is Peter Kwan and I am from Technical Support Sector of Suprema. I am mainly in charge of technical support for BioStar2 API. Today I'm going to talk about BioStar2 new local API. Before we begin, let me briefly explain about how you can find this webinar content. Presentation materials and a link to the recorded video of the webinar will be sent to your email about 7 days after the webinar is over. You can also find the recorded video of the webinar at Suprema Connect website. You can simply Google Suprema Connect to find the website. And lastly, you can visit Suprema Technical Support site to watch the webinar online. And about the questions, you can find an icon for Q&A at the bottom of your webinar screen, and you can ask questions anytime during the webinar, and our Suprema panels will answer your questions in real time. The webinar will cover from the basic understanding of the API all the way to frequently asked questions from the users. First, I'll be going over understanding BioStar2 API. I'll explain what BioStar2 API is and in which cases it can be useful. Second, I'll briefly compare BioStar's old API, which is BioStar2 local API, and the new API, which is the BioStar2 new local API. Third, I'll explain and actually show how to use BioStar2 new local API. This part will include the way to utilize one of the API platforms, which is Postman, and also about C# console example program which I have made for easier utilization of BioStar2 new local API. Lastly, I'll be going over the frequently asked questions from BioStar2 new local API users and take some questions from the audience if the time allows. Before I start talking about BioStar2 new local API, let me explain about what API is. API in basic concept is a middleman that helps your services, in other words, programs or codes, use the functions or programs developed by individuals, enterprises, or public departments. API is an interface which allows you to control the functions that are provided by operation systems or programming languages in applications. API actually stands for Application Programming Interface, and it means the method of transferring data in applications. It defines how you should request for information or data from certain websites and the way you receive such data. Depending on the usage, API can be categorized into two types. First, Open API. Second, Closed API. Open API, as its name says, is for anyone to access and share data. Closed API, on the other hand, provides information to certain users only. Why provide API? And what is the reason behind such individuals or enterprises or public departments providing information openly? As they are the ones holding the data, they have to create certain frames to provide data and also a document that describes about the frame. It can be tedious for them. Then how come the big platforms are providing open APIs for the people? For example, big platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter provide simple login API data. The reason for such simple login API is this. As you use your phones or laptops to surf around different websites for different purposes, such as online shopping, to check your emails, to read articles, to look for restaurants for lunch or dinner. Some websites require you to sign up to use its services after inputting all your information, such as name, email address, phone number, address, birthday, or etc. If it's one or two websites, it won't be a problem. But we use so many different types of websites, and signing up for all of them each time we face another new website can be really stressful. Therefore, those platforms allow those websites and us to share the data so we can sign up in a much more convenient way. In addition, those platforms are preventing users from leaving their services by allowing this simple login. As the era of sharing took place, the society has changed so that the one who share take much more benefits than the one who holds the monopoly of the information. And within this era, open API and closed API were taking place. Let's check out this simple example scenario. Let's imagine that you are at a fancy restaurant and the waiter will give you the menu of the restaurant. And you look through the menu to see the dishes that can be provided by the restaurant. If you order a steak, the waiter will take your order and ask the chef to make that steak. Then the chef will cook that steak and hand it over to the waiter, and the waiter will deliver it to you. And at the end, you'll have your steak and enjoy it however you want. Let's take a look at the role of the waiter in this scenario. The waiter informs about the menu to the customer and requests the kitchen to make the ordered dish. Then he delivers the all-made dish to the customer again. API plays a role just like the waiter in the scenario. API organizes the menu, which is the command list, to the customer or a program, so that it can make orders. API takes orders and works with the chef and delivers the requested menu. In simple words, API is a middleman that helps programs interact with one another. Now that you know that API transfers the requested data to the users, then when or how do we use this API for BioStar? When do we use BioStar2 new local API, and what purpose is there? We can use BioStar2 new local API when we are integrating to use a third-party software alongside with BioStar2. Even without BioStar2 server, users can use BioStar2 new local API to perform a variety of functions that are provided by BioStar2 server, even from some other websites or applications. By calling for API methods, which are post, get, delete, update with the appropriate URL, request body, headers, user can register user to their BioStar2, edit user information, and more. User can also bring certain users' data and delete that user's data by using the API. BioStar2 provides a variety of functions, and those functions are usually for data from the server's database. It can be a user's information, or a number of doors, or an ID of a device. Then what do we have to do to bring such data from the database? This is where API takes place. To bring the desired information, you can use the appropriate API function, which brings that data from DB, and insert the right parameters as input to bring the data you want the way you want. And let me compare between the old API, which is BioStar2 local API, and BioStar2 new local API. This is a comparison between two of them. First, Local API can be used with any BioStar 2 versions. However, BioStar 2 new local API can only be used with BioStar 2.7, 0.10, or later versions. Local API requires a standard license, which is an access control license, for its use, while BioStar 2 new local API does not require any license for the use. Swagger documents addresses are a bit different. You can check the chart for the Swagger document address differences. In addition to the features of the local API, new local API supports more controllable features such as trigger and action, elevators, and more. BioStar 2 local API needs its own server installed. In other words, you need to have an additional install for the API server on your server PC. However, new local API does not require any additional installation of the server. This is how you can access the local API Swagger document. You can insert BioStar's IP address information in addition to the Swagger address information. And this is how you access the Swagger document of the new local API. The same way, you have to put in your IP address of your BioStar 2 server. In addition to that, you have to put in the rest of the words in order to access the Swagger document. This is how you access your BioStar 2 new local API. Onto your address of the BioStar 2, at the last part, you can just fix a few things and you can access the Swagger document. And those are the new features that have been added to the new local API. On the right side, you can see in the red the new features. As BioStar 2 has accepted new features throughout its upgrade, API also received new features that are critical to its use. And let's see how you can use BioStar 2 new local API. This is how you can log in to new local API Swagger. You can go ahead and click on login, click on tryout, enter your login information, click on execute, and you'll be able to see the logged in information of the user. And at the bottom, you'll see the ID, which is called BS session ID. Copy that and go all the way up to the top of the page, click authorize button, and insert the copied BS session ID. And you can now log in to use all the other functions in the Swagger. Click on the execute, and you see the logged in information, and you have the BS session ID. Copy that, go to authorize, paste it in, and now you are logged in. Devices can use API functions to retrieve the user data from the database. It simply has to call the appropriate function, which is get API/users. And this is how you get the user information on the Swagger. The same thing, get/API/users. You can see its parameters there and read its description of what it does. This is how you retrieve logs from the database to the devices. Devices can just call the appropriate API method to retrieve the log data from the database. This is on the Swagger. You can use the function post API/events/search. And there you can see a few or a lot of parameters, and you can fix a few of them and have the data the way you want. For example, in conditions, if you fix your operator value to 0, it can be equal to. For 1, it will be not equal. For example, for 3, you will have to put 2 values, and it will be between the 2 ID values or the time values, the value that you put in the column. You can see the description in the Swagger. You can also use an API function to edit user information from the database. And this is how you edit user information on the Swagger. You have to use a put function with the URL /API/users/user ID. And there you'll be able to see which parameters you can edit in the request body. You can edit name, email, photo, phone, user group ID. You can make it to be active or inactive. You can do lots of editing with that function. And let's move on to how to use BioStar2 new local API with Postman and also the C# console example. Before I show you how to use Postman, let me briefly explain about Postman. Postman is an API platform for building and using APIs. Postman simplifies each step of the API lifecycle and streamlines collaboration so you can create better APIs and faster. For logging in, you would have to put in the logging in method with post function with the URL with your BioStar2 IP address plus the URL for the function. You have to put in /API/login, and with the request body, you have to make it to be raw and in the JSON format, and you can put in your login information that is explained in the Swagger. You can copy and paste the request body into the input, and there you enter your login ID and password. And then if you're successfully logged in, it will show the logged in information of the user, such as user ID, name, gender, email, and other information. And for logging in, you would have to go to its response headers and find the BS session ID. And you would have to use that for the input headers of the other functions if you are going to use other functions in Postman. Before that, let me briefly explain about how to use Postman. You can see here, put in your login information, your URL for the function, and make sure to have the right call name in the front, and go to the body, make it raw, and put the format as JSON, and if you send it, you will see the logged in information, and at the bottom you can see the message which says success. Go to headers, and you'll be able to see the session ID here. Copy that, and let's say you want to make let's say you will want to retrieve the data of the user with user ID 1. You would have to go to its headers, request headers, and make BS session ID value here, and paste the BS session ID that you just copied from logging in, and send. Then you will have the appropriate response body of the URL call that you have made. So here, I have made a call to receive user data with user ID 1. And here it is, user with user ID 1. Its name is 1. Its email address, its start date time for the ID, and ID expire time, and its user group data, and all the other data here. You always have to make sure that you make BS session ID value in your input headers and copy it and paste it into here. This is how you use Postman with BioStar2 new local API. And next, is about C# example program that I have made. As you can see on the screen, you can use all those functions. Starting from the top, you have to log in first. And for me, I have made it so that once you log in, the BS session ID is saved and is used automatically for the other methods. So after you log in once, you can use all the other functions. So here, user-related functions are create user, register profile photo, register CSN card, register fingerprints, send email for visual face registration, and you can also update users to be active or inactive. You can create doors, you can search and create user groups, access level, search schedules, search and create access groups. And for the logs, you can retrieve logs. And for other functions, you can retrieve the data of the user list, door list, and device list. And lastly, you can input 99 to quit from the program. I'll briefly show you about the program. There are a few adjustments that I have made. You can see here. Some of the related codes and examples and explanations are posted on our technical support site. You can find a board named New Local API and find all the information. You can also take the code that I had put up there and use it for your use in order to integrate BioStar2 functions for your programs or your websites. Here, I add my login information. Here, it receives the HTTPS certificate. And once the login is successful, it writes the line, login successful. And here, if BS session ID exists in the response body, response headers, it saves it into the session ID value so that it can be used for the other functions. So let me run this. Welcome to BioStar2 New Local API. First, you have to log in. So insert 1. After inserting 1 here, it says it's status 200 okay. It says it's successful, and the login is successful, and the BS session ID is printed out here. Let's say you want to create user number 2. You have to enter username. Let's say Peter. Enter user ID. Let's say 30. Login ID. Same as the name and password. There, the user. This is the input request value. The user has been made. This is the result. Message success. And lastly, let's see that user information. Let's get user list. Here, I got the user list. I have a total of 5 users, starting from user 1, user visitor, user 2 named Sharon, user with 46063 named Karina, and the user that I just have made. Let's go back to our presentation. And let me enter into frequently asked questions about BioStar2 New Local API from its users. First question, is there extra cost if I want to use the New Local API? Answer is no, you do not need to pay for an additional cost. BioStar2 New Local API does not require any licenses. Question number 2, I am using the old local API now. Can I use the new local API? The answer is yes, you can use the new local API. You can use local API and new local API at the same time. Question number 3, I'm using BioStar2 local API now. Can I just fix my URL to use the new local API? Answer is no. You cannot simply edit your URL to switch from local API to new local API. You should consider the parameters since their parameters structures are very different. Some of them are the same, but some of them might have different parameters, so you would have to consider that. Question number 4, can I use my subdomain name in my API URL? Answer is yes, you can use your subdomain name in your new local API URL. You can use your BioStar2 IP or subdomain name in the URL. For me, I have been using my IP, my BioStar2 IP, and also my subdomain name and the localhost IP, which is 127.0.1. And as I mentioned before, BioStar2 new local API, a new section has been made in Suprema technical support website. So you can visit that website and go to that section and search and check out the tips and how to use the new local API functions there. It consists of a variety of examples of the new local API usage and tips. You can find it at the link in the presentation document, or you can simply search on Google. And now we have Q&A and survey time. You can use the Zoom function to raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question. And meanwhile, I'll activate 2 surveys I have, and you can answer them while I answer your questions. Is there any questions, or are you asking questions in the chat room? You can take the survey number 1 at this time as I'm answering the question. I see a question, will you provide the C# sample source code? Some of the functions source codes are shared on our technical support website in the new local API section. And if you'd like to receive the entire code, I think it's possible to send it to you with the presentation materials if you want. I have about 53 people who took the survey number 1, and I'll end the survey number 1 and start survey number 2. Survey number 2 has been started, so please take the survey. I have about 40 people who took survey number 2. It will be great if you can take the survey number 2 at this time. I have about 50 people who took the survey. I'll finish the survey here. Thank you for attending my webinar on BioStar2 new local API. If you have any questions or any additional inquiries, you can send email to me, and I will be able to answer your questions then. Thank you, and this will be it for the webinar. Thank you for attending.